Internalized oppression is in many ways even more dangerous than an oppression at the hand of, the tyrant or this external force, because it is grounded in a belief. It's one thing to be treated as less than, it's another thing to believe it.
When we talk about Black liberation, it's always external, and we never sort of contend with like our own anti-Blackness, our own misogyny, and so that's really the spirit of the conversation that we wanted to have with you. So the first question is, how important is it for us to unlearn anti-Blackness?
I think if you only consider liberation to be about these external circumstances that you're trying to alter, it can be not only exhausting, but lead to a lot of despair. And I like to remind myself and others that there is a kind of liberation that occurs in the interior, that the systems, the external systems kind of designed to terrorize us and keep us from freedom, some part of them can kind of find themselves grown in the interior life, in our interior landscape. Some seeds can be planted along the way, and we always have a degree of agency to root out those seeds habitually, to find where are the sites of anti-Blackness that I've adopted, how are kind of what in me is kind of in secret alliance with these systems that are meant to destroy me. And I feel that once we begin to examine that, once we begin to kind of root those out, it's much easier to see and name when something is in contrast or something is in conflict or a threat to that interior dignity.
Absolutely. And why do you think internalized oppression is dangerous?
Internalized oppression is in many ways even more dangerous than an oppression at the hand of, the tyrant or this external force, because it is grounded in a belief. It's one thing to be treated as less than, it's another thing to believe it, and then kind of replicate that belief in yourself, replicate that belief in the world around you. If I don't know who I am, if I don't know what I'm afraid of, if I don't know my desires, what I want, if I'm not really well acquainted with what's happening in me, and how it relates to the systems of oppression and exploitation, I am going to mimic and mirror all of those systems in the world around me. They're absolutely connected. There's James Baldwin, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, people who don't know who they are privately accept and always have accepted that disaster which we call American politics, that disaster which we call foreign policy. And he says the incoherence of one is directly connected to the incoherence of the other. So if your own soul is incoherent to yourself, then you will have a certain incoherence when you're examining and identifying, the disaster systems around us.
Absolutely. And something that we often talk about in abolitionist spaces is this idea that we have an inner cop within us, right? That we sort of tend to punish ourselves the way that we've been taught to punish and the way that we exist in society. And so I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how does that look like in community, right? When we internalize anti-Blackness, then we sort of reflect it in community as well. Can you just speak to that?
I think, it always begins with the mirror in a way. When we're little, I think for many of us, there's this shift in terms of how shame lives in the body, and one day you kind of meet your own face in the mirror and you realize that some of your thoughts aren't your own. Some of your thoughts might not have begun in you and how you're interpreting your own face. And I think, for me, I had a father who went to great lengths to kind of protect my reflection, protect my experience of myself. So every morning he would kind of braid my sister and I's hair and grease our scalps, a few times a week. And he would lick his thumbs and press, them against our kind of bushy eyebrows. And he had this thing, he would say, "You look good. Do you feel good?" And every morning we'd say, yeah, I look good and I feel good. And there's this kind of ritual of dignity, ritual of kind of reimagining, re-envisioning that we have to do for our children, but we also have to do for ourselves and our communities to kind of remind ourselves of our faces. Otherwise, you have situations in which a little girl meets herself in the mirror and sees, something she doesn't entirely feel content to see, and then when she sees the face of her mother, what will that experience be? When she sees the face of her sister or eventually her classmate, what will that experience be? But yeah, it starts with the mirror, I think.
That's beautiful. And I love the story about your dad and the way that he nourished you both, you and your sister. It's such a beautiful follow-up, because what we wanted to ask you was, who did you turn to when you wanted to confront your internalized anti-Blackness and love your Blackness? And what did they say?
When it was time for me to kind of confront the anti-Blackness in me, confront the kind of systems of oppression in me, I feel like I really ran backwards. I ran to the past. I ran to how I was raised. I think there was a kind of original family culture, a family spirituality, I would even say, that was about Black dignity, that was about reverence for the Black body as opposed to the trauma and destruction of it. And when it came time for me to kind of reclaim that, I experienced it less as a kind of awakening and more as a remembering. I went back to, the couch where my father greased my scalp. I went back to, my grandma in the supermarket, looking someone in the eye that wouldn't look her in the eye back. And yeah, experienced it kind of in memory. I also think I went to the artists in looking for how to kind of reclaim myself, decolonize my interior. I kind of fled to poets and people who tend to be so disinterested in indoctrinating you into any particular belief system. I think the nature of an artist is kind of conveyance and a shared experience, or conveyance of the human experience, as opposed to this is what I want you to think. And so I didn't actually flee to a lot of nonfiction books immediately. I found a lot of solace in poetry that was comfortable with kind of the imprecise, that encouraged me to kind of make language and make sense of language for myself.
Is there any poet that comes to mind that you fled to?
I think the poets to do this work with would be poets like June Jordan, who was so well acquainted with her inner life. There's a real kind of honesty that comes through her work, a kind of confession, I think, that comes through her poetry, but also she kind of refuses to be completely dislocated from kind of the systems in the world around her and the circumstances of the world around her. It's not just kind of flowery vagueness, there's teeth to it. I think Audre Lorde's poems are wonderful. Danez Smith, countless.
There's an abundance
Mm-hmm.
of people you turn to. So you talked a little bit about your grandma and how, when she was in the supermarket, she would look at people in the eye, and that wouldn't want to look her in the eye. And so I'm curious if you can tell us how confronting your own anti-Blackness can be a form of resistance, which we kind of saw with your mom.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a kind of peace that comes, in knowing who you are and having your kind of beliefs about yourself be true and be honest and be clear, and to have agency. In the world around us, we just don't always possess the agency that we'd like, and something about that interior excavation is ours, and we own it, and there are places in us that, people can't touch, and when we're trying to think of kind of meaningful resistance, I think to start with places of profound agency, of in secret places almost, that we can truly subvert, what we've been told without being threatened. We can truly tell the truth about what we think without worrying about with someone looking over our shoulder, those those inside places of anti-Blackness and dignity, I think that the hidden nature of them can be really kind of fertile ground to kind of know oneself and learn oneself.
What do you want to say to those navigating their own anti-Blackness?
I think if you're a person who's kind of on the journey of exposing your own anti-Blackness, of decolonizing your inner life, my advice to you would be to look back, to look at the people who have survived, what we've survived on some level, and have found in mystery some way to retain, a sense of beauty and life and joy about themselves. I would say look back. I would also say, in certain seasons, it's good for us all to remember. James Baldwin, he talks about, never really being able to see your own face. And I mean, he calls it the tyranny of the mirror. He says mirrors can only lie to a certain extent, and that we need each other, and to know that we really need each other to see ourselves clearly. So whenever I talk about kind of rooting out anti-Blackness or this interior excavation, it's important to know sometimes we can't be trusted to kind of perform our own exorcisms, that you need the face of another, you need people that you trust who really see you clearly, who can kind of point to the places and say, no, that's not your nose, this is your nose, let me tell you about it. Yeah.
That's beautiful, knowing that this isn't work that we could do on our own. I think is refreshing to also hear, because oftentimes when we talk about the interior world, when we talk about excavating our own anti-Blackness, it's something that there's so much shame that is connected to it. And so to hear you say, no, someone else can help you in that process, I think is really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to separate kind of this work from kind of that shame based, like it can't become another practice in self-loathing. That's not our tool. Shame is that's for the supremacists. That's their tool. That's not how we've done it, and that's not how we've practiced it. And there can be a kind of interior journey that just becomes a masquerade for another form of self-hatred. And that's why it's so important when you practice in community, when you practice that kind of excavation in community, you can kind of readjust and pivot when you find yourself using it as an excuse to kind of beat yourself up.
In the book, there's this prayer that has really stuck with me, and it's marveling at your own face. And I was wondering if you would be willing to read it for us.
Sure, yeah. It's been a while. For marveling at your own face. God of the flesh, when we consider what is worthy of our wonder, it is easy to forget our own faces, our bodies. The world is relentless in indoctrinating us into self-hatred, into anti-Blackness, into transphobia, into misogyny in all forms. We are slowly and steadily brainwashed to despise our own faces from the time we're tall enough to stare up at ourselves in the mirror. How can we resist this? Let the tyranny of the mirror be no more. May instead it become a portal to delight, to pleasure, and to love. These noses, these hips, the way our hair rises and falls, the memories etched into our hands and faces, remind us of the miracle of flesh that grows back, of blood that pulses warm beneath the skin that holds us, of bodies, these holy, beautiful bodies that are working 1,000 unseen miracles just so we can read these lines, breathe this air, cry or not cry. As we peer into the face before us, remind us that we are something to behold. We believe. Forgive our unbelief. Ase.
Thank you. I'm curious, sort of as our last question, what was going through your mind when you wrote that? I'm sure you get these questions a lot.
When I wrote that, I was thinking of my nieces actually. Um, they're young and vivacious, and they have this kind of sacred audacity, this kind of, you know, belief that they have a right to be here that is so beautiful. And I'm still on some level aware of that always being at risk. And I want to just protect it and put it in this case where no one can touch it. That kind of audacity, you know. And so I think I had them in mind, and other children as well, you know, to have some counter words for the moment where the glass box maybe shatters or tilts.
Which we know sometimes and oftentimes happens as well. So thank you for sharing your words and sharing, having this interview with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.